This is the point of any pointed metal implement. You got a bevel, and you've got the back, and you've got the angle. On a real chisel, it looks like this. Here's your bevel, here's your back, and here's your edge. Your goal is to get that roundness there as fine as possible. You want the diameter of that roundness as small as possible. That will give you the keenest edge possible. In most modern metals, testing has shown that that roundness is somewhere between 60 and 120 micrometers, which is somewhere around 1 to 2 thousandths of an inch roundness-ish. It looks, when you look at your blade, it looks like it's much sharper than that. But testing has shown that as soon as you pass it through the wood one time, it's going to be rounded somewhere between 60 and 120 microns. So how we achieve sharpness is by using an abrasive material. In this case, it's a diamond stone. And we apply that abrasive material at an angle, which is our bevel angle, to the blade to be sharpened. We're going to assume that we have flattened our back previously, and once you flatten the back once, it's done forever. You should never need to reflatten it. Even if you chip off a big chunk, you should be able to grind the bevel back to a flat back area. So, what's important in sharpening is the angle that you have your blade to the flatness of the sharpening material. So between the back and the sharpening material, we have an angle, and most of the angles are measured from this side up to the back, giving us what we call our bevel angle. So testing has shown that the ideal bevel angle for most wood implements is going to be somewhere between 25 and 35 degrees. That gives you the most material to support a sharp edge and a sharp enough angle to cut through the vast majority of woods. On a bevel down plane, that sharpening angle doesn't make any difference to how well the blade cuts. What makes the big difference is whether that edge is keen, whether you've got this end of it with as small a diameter as you can possibly get. So the bed angle on most bevel down planes is around 45 degrees. So if you make your plane angle less than 45 degrees, then the heel of the blade will not contact the surface of the wood and prevent you from cutting. So if you make that angle on your plane anything less than 40 degrees, you're probably going to be just fine and be able to get a sharp edge that cuts the wood well and maintains that edge well. When it comes to chisels, your chiseling angle determines the contact angle in the wood. So if you're paring and have it very flat, then you've got the bevel angle pretty close. If you're way up here and chiseling, then you've got a much steeper angle than the bevel angle. So you can see that your bevel angle isn't absolutely critical in terms of working the wood. It is critical in maintaining the sharpness of that bevel, the sharpness of that edge. It's supported by the material in the bevel. If your bevel is too shallow an angle, then that edge won't have enough support and it will just roll up or crumble. So if you find your blade getting dull really fast, go for a steeper angle. Like if you got it sharpened at 20 degrees and it's dulling after only 10 or 20 cuts, then maybe set it to 25 degrees. Maybe it'll last longer. The idea is to find an angle that you're happy with putting on there that actually supports the sharpness of the blade. Okay, there are two main ways of approaching sharpening. You can sharpen with the width of the blade, like that, or you can sharpen along the blade, like that, sort of sideways. Both methods work. Both methods have advantages and disadvantages. The advantage to this method is that if you're using only pull strokes, lift it up, pull, then if you form a burr, you'll be able to see it very clearly forming. If you use the push-pull method, where you push and then pull, every push stroke, that forming burr is going to be cut away by the abrasive. So you won't necessarily see a burr. Some metals will form a burr regardless, that you will actually be able to see flicking back and forth on there. But most metals that I've worked with, they don't do that. If you're using the push-pull method, where you're going to push, pull, every push stroke, that wire, that little burr on the edge there, it gets rolled under and gets cut off. So that method doesn't generally produce a burr. You can also use, with the push method, you can use what's called a figure 8, where you go like that. So you got horizontal movement as well as vertical movement. The reason they do that is because they say that it gives a more consistent bevel with less watchful eye. If you're doing a bevel like this with the push-pull method, then you have to maintain the same angle on the push stroke and on the pull stroke, which for an unpracticed hand can be difficult. Whereas if you're doing the figure 8, as you go horizontally, that entire surface is being abraded at the same angle as you move horizontally. And in the figure 8, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 horizontal movements per trip up and down the stone. So that gives you a fair chance to get an even bevel. In my experience, I find that as you're doing the figure of 8, you have a tendency to do this as well as this. So that kind of winds up with a bevel that's rounded in all directions, unless you're really careful. I find, for me, that my body mechanics allow me to do the push-pull method freehand and keep a consistent angle. I find that to be the easiest method. And there are other methods as well, but those are the three really big ones. Forward and backwards with the blade the width, figure 8 with the blade the width, and I don't know, we'll call it horizontal or sideways. In any case, your goal is to maintain that angle. You want the whole of your bevel to be sitting firmly and flatly on that abrasive material that you choose to use. Okay, there are many ways of sharpening a edge on an abrasive surface. And there are a host of abrasive surfaces, but we'll just use this diamond stone to illustrate our methods. You can use wet or dry stones. You can use a diamond stone or any other stone dry. You don't need anything on it at all. The disadvantage to the dry method is that it is generally a lot noisier than the wet method, and there's nothing to take the debris material away from the surface. So it will clog up with debris very fast compared to a thoroughly wet method. But dry methods are quite easy to clean the surface. People use erasers or cloths or compressed air. These all work to an extent, but that metal that's coming off of your blade is going to be stuck between the abrasive particles, and it's going to require a little bit of effort to get it out, especially if you're using it dry. So you might want to invest in a brass brush or even a stainless steel brush for files and just give it a light brushing after you've sharpened using the dry method. Wet methods all generally involve flooding the surface with a liquid. You can use oil or you can use water. The advantage to water-based methods, this is windshield washer fluid. I use it because it doesn't rust the plate if I don't get it thoroughly dry at the end of my sharpening session. Whereas water will rust any iron left from your blades. It will rust it in the stone and it will clog it up pretty badly. So something like windshield washer fluid will help keep that very clean. And then as you work, you can wipe off your surface with a cloth, which will help clear away any of that metal debris and any abrasives that have broken off, or you can flood wash it. So if I were to flood wash this, I would tip it up at an angle like that, and then I would start at the top and just wash it across like that. That will move any of that debris down and blast it out with the small force of that spray bottle, and then you can again wipe it off. In a wet method, you want to have a puddle, a real puddle on the surface, whether it's oil or water. You don't want to just have a light dampness, because what you're wanting to achieve with the water or the liquid is you're wanting it to move, to float that debris off of your stone and out of your abrasives so that your abrasive has the best chance of working the longest. So you want to keep it good and wet, and you can see here that this is a good puddle on there, and that's about how I work a stone. If you're just starting out and you don't really have a good feel for how to do this, then you may want to get a simple honing guide. This is an edge clamping honing guide. They are the easiest to use. They're the most likely to result in a perfectly square blade if the honing guide is square. So what you do is you put your blade in with the back up, and then you just tighten the gauge down on it, and you set it in the jaw. You see there are 3 jaws. There's one down at the very bottom, one in the middle, and one at the top. And there's also a pinch jaw right at the very, very top. Not all gauges are like that. Many gauges just have one setting. This particular gauge has 3, And this particular gauge comes with measurements that tell you how far it is from this front to the tip of your blade to get that angle. So if I put this blade, if I want this blade at 35 degrees, then I put the blade on here, I give this a slight loosen, I ram this hard up against there, and I tighten it down. Now, when I put that, I didn't tighten it down. Okay, there. Now, when I tighten it down and put it on my stone, that blade is going to be at 35-degree bevel angle. And this roller will keep it at that angle all the way across and back. So I can sharpen this at 35 degrees just by rolling it back and forth. It doesn't require you to press down hard on it. As you can see, I'm just pressing down with my finger and moving it back and forth with one finger on the end. And as you can see, it is leaving debris, cut. It's cutting, even at that little bit of pressure. So you don't need a lot of pressure. What you just need is to be able to move that back and forth many, many times. So that's a sharpening guide. Okay, so when you do this, you just put it on there. It's on the stone sitting there. You put your fingers on it just to support it, and then you just move it back and forth. You know, I'm not pressing very hard. I'm just letting it do its own thing, but I am letting it roll sideways a little bit in order to use the whole surface of the stone, and I want it to just work that blade. And you can see that the debris from all that water on there is being cleared out and pushed off to the side. So that's how much water you want on there. And then when it gets too much material on there, you just give it a squirt, and you can see that that squirt is enough to move most of that debris out of the way, allowing our edge to be fully engaged with abrasives. And when you're done with sharpening for the day, then I give it another wash off like that, and then I use a cloth to wipe it all up. Wiping off my bench top and wiping off the stone entirely. And since I'm using windshield washer fluid, I'm not worried about getting this completely dry. I'm not worried about getting this completely dry because it's windshield washer fluid. It isn't going to rust. And when I'm done sharpening my blade, I wipe it off completely, and then I give it a nice little bath in, it doesn't say on here, it's Camilla oil. I got this from Japan. So I give it a squirt on the top, squirt on the bottom, and then I give it a good rub with a cloth dedicated to Camilla oil, so that I get every bit of this covered with Camilla oil. Then now that's not going to rust. And you also need to wipe off your guide, especially the roller. I give that a good coat of Camilla oil as well. And there you are, done for the day.